This is more Doug DeMuro, and today I'm driving the Vector W8. But before I do a little overview, the Vector W8 was an American supercar made in the late 1980s and early 1990s, incredibly rare and meant to resemble a fighter jet both in appearance and interior cockpit layout. Naturally, this car is tremendously quirky, and so the video of all the quirks and features ran almost 40 minutes, which is pretty much the limit of what I found people are willing to watch or click on YouTube. People see a video that's 48 minutes long and they think, no thanks, I'm not gonna watch that documentary. I'm just going to go watch something else. So I figured instead of trying to cut things out and cram everything into 40 minutes, and then you would lose some of the quirks and features of the Vector and the driving experience would be really short, I would just split it up into 2 videos. So yesterday on my main channel, you saw 40 minutes of Vector quirks and features, and today I'm going to drive it. Now, if you want to check out the Vector quirks and features, I've linked that video in the description below, the original video. But today I'm going to get behind the wheel of the Vector, get it out on the road, and see how it drives, and then I'm going to give it a DougScore. Here goes. All right, driving the Vector W8. Definitely the most insane car I have ever driven for this YouTube channel. And already it is just a wild world. The accelerator and brake pedal, although they are next to each other in the usual place, the brake pedal is like 6 inches behind the accelerator pedal. So it's over and then you gotta go way down to find it, which is kind of funny. The width is pretty substantial. It is a surprisingly wide vehicle, and there's an unusual amount of car to your left as the driver, on the driver's side between the door. That's where the transmission lever is, which of course is ridiculous. The owner told me people just swarm. He told me he took it to his local Cars and Coffee here in Jersey once, and people just emptied to go and look at this thing. The brakes are not great. Well, they're actually good. They're okay. You just have to do a deep, deep stab of the brake pedal. And of course, the brake pedal is already pretty far back there, so it's a real commitment. Now you're looking at this, your speed and your revs on this ridiculous screen, not in front of you, over to the left, and there's a lot of stuff going on that screen, so you gotta kind of figure it out. There's actually a reasonable amount of room in here. My head is tight up against the glass, but my knees and legs are just fine. In fact, I tilted the wheel down a little bit. It was too high. Man, you can hear the blow-off valve of the turbo. That sounds so cool. What is this thing? This is one of the most bizarre vehicles. You see all your windshield wipers in front of you, which of course is just so strange. All right, I'm gonna give it some real acceleration here and see what happens. It feels reasonably quick, although the owner did tell me that it's sluggish down low and he's having, maybe it's a problem, maybe it's just how it was, and that's definitely true. The car doesn't really feel incredibly fast until the turbos start to spool. Woo! But when they do, it is nice and quick, and it's odd because the 3-speed auto, which is ridiculous, but it doesn't shift all that often, and so it can just kind of go and go once it's going into higher RPMs and just kind of go and go like a CVT, which is actually almost a benefit. Now, obviously it'd be better if you had a dual clutch or something like that, but this is the world we're living in here. Visibility is tough to the right and down, just because you just don't know what's going on down there. The front of the car is sort of in a vague place out there. The brakes, you just have to really floor the brake pedal to go anywhere. The engine sound is just massive. I mean, the car just has an incredible sound to it. Not necessarily a great, like, exotic car, sports car sound, but a big sound, a substantial one. All right, I'm giving it some gas here. Woo, that blow-off valve is unbelievable. It's quick. It does feel pretty quick, but you do have to get going. You definitely do have to get your speed up. Because it's a 3-speed, there's not any gears that it can downshift into, so you're just basically waiting for the engine speeds to climb and the turbos to spool up. You do kind of bake in here. The owner told me the air conditioning is actually not only exists, but really, really good. I can't turn on because it'll mess with my mics, but I guess that's the antidote for the fact that there's this glass panel sunroof. In terms of steering and handling, the steering is lighter than I was expecting that it would be, given that this is a car from this era. So many have this really heavy, non-assisted steering. It's just awful, whatever. This car, I actually it could be a little heavier, and that would be nice. Visibility is truly ridiculously terrible, absolutely awful, but pretty normal of cars from this era. Rear visibility is just a total nightmare. You can't see a thing behind you. The mirrors are just atrocious. It's almost kind of funny how they're positioned sort of fixed in place on the doors there. You actually can see using them. They're not that bad, but they are small. They're in the right spot, they're just small. The ride quality is not that bad. You can probably hear it and see it bumping around, but I've driven a lot of exotic cars. This is much more comfortable than most modern exotics. I would rather be in one of these than in a modern McLaren, which sounds ridiculous, but I'm sincere about that. Obviously, if you own one of these, you run into the problem of maintaining it and that sort of thing. But in terms of drivability, I could sit here for a while, and if I had the AC on, I think it wouldn't really be all that bad. Man, this thing is just so bizarre. It's even crazier than a Countach from this era, although I have a little bit more room in this. You have more of a center driving position feel. You have the crazy windshield wipers. This car just looks absolutely insane. And even from the inside, I mean, this screen is just the most ridiculous thing you'll ever see. It's just absurd. All right, I'm gonna get on it again here. It's actually pretty quick. It really is, especially for a car from this era. By modern standards, I imagine, and especially with age, this one sat for a while, I imagine it's lost something. But I find it to be quicker than I was expecting it to. This car is actually better built and better driving than I was thinking that it would be. Probably a testament to the current owner who spent an enormous amount of time and effort keeping it up. But I'm actually surprised. The Vector W8 doesn't suck. It's not the greatest car, but this is very comparable and probably better than Testarossa, Countach. It's definitely on that level. Even though this was an upstart company that only made 20 cars, it very much feels like those things, and in some ways, it's actually an improvement. And so that's the Vector W8 Twin Turbo. Truly everything about this car is insane. The look, the interior, the engine, the transmission, the story of the company, all of it. I have only ever seen one of these in person before today, and I have always wanted to drive it. And now that I have, I am absolutely certain in my belief that this is the craziest supercar ever made. And with that in mind, time to give the Vector a DougScore.
Starting with the weekend categories and styling, this car isn't beautiful, but it's so cool, so amazing, so daring, it easily earns a 10 out of 10. Acceleration to 0 to 60 in 4 point something, and it earns a 7 out of 10. Handling is good, but it could be better. It certainly doesn't measure up against modern supercars, though that's to be expected, and it earns a 6 out of 10. Fun factor is decent, though it's dulled by the 3-speed automatic and the fear that at any moment you could break something which you'll never be able to find a replacement for, and it gets an 8 out of 10. Cool factor is obviously as good as it gets. I can think of almost no cars that would draw as much of a crowd at Cars and Coffee, and it gets a 10 out of 10 for a total weekend score of 41 out of 50. Next up are the daily categories and features. It's pretty low on tech by modern standards, no surprise, and it gets a 2 out of 10. Comfort is surprisingly decent, and it gets a 3 out of 10. Quality is also surprisingly decent. It'll be impossible to find any replacement parts, but this is a low production 30-year-old car, and basically everything works, and works pretty well. It all feels reasonably well done, of course with the caveat that it could break at any second and you have absolutely no support or replacement parts if it does, so it gets a 3 out of 10. Practicality, I can think of few cars less practical given the visibility, the small interior, and the impossibility of maintenance and repairs, and it gets a 1 out of 10. Finally, value, and these aren't as expensive as I think they should be. They're under $1 million, way under, which isn't much considering the legend around this car. But of course, if you actually actually got one, attempting to use it or find somebody to work on it could be tricky. I think these will go up in value, but still it gets a 7 out of 10 for a total daily score of 17 out of 50. Added up, and the DougScore is 58 out of 100, which places it here against other 1980s and 1990s supercars I've reviewed. The Vector W8 is near the top of the weekend scores, which makes sense because basically nothing is this cool and insane. But the daily score is abysmal, lower than the Jaguar XJ220, tied with the Countach because you could never use this car with any frequency. But imagine if you did.